John, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate you taking the time to have a conversation with me. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself before we get started?
Well, sure. I was born in Virginia, but grew up in rural South Carolina. My mom had a nervous breakdown when I was 4, and so I was raised by my grandparents, who were wonderful people. But I was raised in South Carolina, rural South Carolina. Grew up. I went to Duke University undergrad, and my plans at that time were to be a lawyer and a politician. And about halfway through, I got interested in Christian ministry. My life had a radical change there, and since then, I've been a pastor, missionary, and now for 26 years a professor at the seminary here in North Carolina. That's the short version. So
Cool. So today we're to talk about abortion. Could you tell me more about your position on that topic?
well, yeah, it's twofold. As a citizen of the U.S., I think that one of our founding beliefs is a belief in the right to life, and so I'm very interested in the right to see if this is a right to life issue. And as a Christian believer, I do think that there's a sanctity of life because God made humans in his own image, and therefore protecting humans is a very serious, important thing for me as a believer, and as well as loving my neighbor as myself. And loving my neighbor would include being careful about their lives, both the appearance of a child and the child itself.
Okay. My position is that abortion qualifies under all the legal definitions of self-defense for great bodily harm. I think there's four. One is prolonged or permanent scarring or disfigurement, acute or severe pain. I forget what the other two are. One of them is risk of death. I think that's the one it doesn't qualify for. I forget what the third one is, but it qualifies for 3 out of the 4. And the justification for use of lethal force of self-defense only requires meeting any one of the criterion. And so, as far as I'm aware, abortion qualifies, therefore, as use of lethal defense to abort the baby outside of your body. And so it's just a self-defense issue.
Yeah, I would say that self-defense qualifies in some cases. For example, an ectopic pregnancy clearly is the dangers to a mother's life and things like that. But beyond that, I'm not sure that pregnancy is that dangerous to most people in most situations that requires lethal force to remove it from your body. Women have been having babies for a long time, and quite often it's not that difficult a process. Permanent scarring, lethal force, I'm not sure that qualifies for self-defense on those grounds in most cases.
Well, I think literally every pregnancy causes permanent scarring and disfigurement. There's not really much debate about that in the medical community, and it causes acute physical pain. That's what happens. Was one of the most painful experiences supposedly ever of any human or something. I gotta remember what the third one is, but can't remember right now. But so it definitely qualifies under those two, and just one of those two justifies use of lethal force. So I'm not sure why it wouldn't qualify.
Yeah, I'm not sure that if I understand, maybe I don't understand the legal qualifications as well as you do, but I think that when someone, for example, enters your home, even a robber, you have to have some type of reason for not just resisting, but using lethal force. And again, the pain that pregnancy causes, labor causes, delivery causes, is acute at the end when you deliver the baby. But for most of the 9 months of a pregnancy, the pain is not that difficult or extreme. But yes, at the end, there's a pain there. Does it justify ending another life? It's a more difficult question, I think.
I'm not so sure. Like, for example, if you imagined a robber causing you equivalent physical pain to pregnancy, would you be justified in using lethal force to prevent that? I would say probably yes. Like if a robber had, like, say, I don't know, softball or something that's going to shove it into one of your extremities, you would probably be justified in shooting them in self-defense.
Well, again, there's a little bit difference here because you've kind of, in a pregnancy, you've kind of invited that a little bit because you've had the action that causes that pain to be happening. You had sexual intercourse. If that was rape, of course, it'd be a different situation. But when you freely engage in this activity, that brought this new life into being in your body, you've kind of opened the door and invited the robber in.
Well, that wouldn't make a difference. I don't know. I mean, that's a point many people say, but I don't understand why. Like literally, if you just leave your door open and say, Come rob my stuff," you can still shoot them in self-defense. Like it doesn't matter if you invite them in. If they're trying to steal your property, you still have a right to defend yourself. So it literally makes no difference.
Well, again, I'm not sure that I would see it quite that way. Perhaps, but again, I think that again, they're not robbing you. You invited them in. You actually did an action, an overt action that brought them into being, and then to say, "I now have the right to destroy this life." They're not a robber. You invited them in. They didn't do anything to place themselves inside you. You did things to place them inside you.
Well, again, so if you invite someone into your home and then they start to physically damage your body, you have a right to defend yourself, even if you did invite them in. So,
Well, again, but you foresaw that. I mean, you know that what happens with a pregnancy, that there's going to be, they're in your body, they're going to be taking up space, those types of things. And so, again, I'm not sure that they're attacking you. That you again, they're doing what you placed them in your body to do.
well, it wouldn't make a difference because it's causing damage to your body. It's still your body. And so you can stop consenting at any point and be like, this is my body. And even if you invite them in, you're like, nope, okay, I'm tired of the pain here. Get out. You have the right to say that at any point because it's your body. And so if someone is causing you physical harm to some extent, the great bodily harm extent, you have the right to say, okay, no, stop at any time. You can't just be like, all right, I'm just going to take it no matter what now.
They have no rights. Then the baby inside you has no rights whatsoever.
Has the equal rights. It can also say, I want out at any time. They usually don't
The baby
choose
can
that.
say that.
Yeah. So, like, if you imagine the baby was a fully consenting adult or had a mind of a fully consenting adult, and at any point it said, I don't want to be in this anymore and want out, it would have the right to say that. And you would also have to respect its right. But you don't have to respect I forget what it's called, where you exercise authority over another person. You can to like maintain yourself in their body. That isn't a right. You have to have both consenting parties have to agree to maintain themselves in the relationship, but either one can agree to disengage from the relationship, and
It's kind of hard to
like a
get
divorce.
the consent to the baby, though, isn't it?
Right. I don't know if any babies would want to get out, but they have that right. So they have equal rights as the mother.
They have the right to stay in and say, you invited me in. I'm here. I'm where you invited me to be. I'm doing what's natural for
That's
me.
not a right. So that's what I was trying to explain before. In order for a paired relationship, both parties have to consent to maintain the relationship, but either party has the right to disengage or not maintain the relationship. So the baby has the equal rights of the mother in every context of the situation. Both parties have to agree to maintain. Either party can disagree and cause the ejection of the relationship. And it's the same with marriage. So there's no right to say you get to force the other to maintain the relationship. That's not a right. Nobody has that right.
Well, but in one case, the result of the continued relationship is inconvenience and pain, discomfort. On the other case, this loss of life. It seems a little bit imbalanced there.
Well, that's what the legal criterion, great bodily harm is for. If it meets that criterion, that's when lethal force is justified. So if it was just a pimple or something, then yeah, it would not justify lethal force. But since a baby literally reorganizes the organs in the body, causes a severe stretching of the uterus and other parts, causes bleeding, permanent scarring, mental anguish, emotional distress, and prolonged suffering over the course of 9 months from back pain, emotional pain, stress, discomfort, financial, every challenges, everything. It justifies that. So if it was just like having a pregnancy was essentially like having an itch or something, then yeah, it wouldn't. But the amount of pain caused to the body definitely justifies use of lethal force.
Well, I think between a pimple and grave bodily harm, I think pregnancy seems to me to fall somewhere between that. I've observed a woman with a pregnancy, my wife, a couple of times, and I don't think she would call that grave bodily harm, permanent scarring. It was definitely the last months especially difficult. I'm not sure I would call that grave bodily harm, though.
Well, it's
Dog back there?
yeah, it's the dogs barking. But so it's been medically determined by doctors to meet this criterion. So it's whether or not a woman particularly has an opinion really doesn't make a difference, because the legal definition and the medical definition have met this in every potential way. So it's been classified in this way in about half the states as just literally one of the criterion for great bodily harm. It's just in the list. But there's been multiple court cases where they've established that this is literally medically in every conceivable way meets the criterion. And so they've compared a bunch of different court cases where use of lethal force was justified against a guy with a knife or a guy trying to hit you or whatever, and the amount of physical pain, damage to the body, risk of death, whatever criterion you want to go off of, are worse in pregnancy than was justified in the vast majority of self-defense cases that don't involve a gun.
Yeah. Well, again, I'm surprised to hear that's called that way. I would want to value life a little bit more highly than that. That I would not want to see this as something that can be disposed of quite that easily.
Would you be against using lethal force in self-defense? Because I see it the exact same pretty much.
If your life is being threatened, genuinely being threatened, your life is being threatened, yes, I would say that the self-defense idea comes into play there. I think the classic is a ectopic pregnancy. I mean, I think everyone recognizes that is lethal, deadly to a woman. In that situation, I think the self-defense idea comes into play. But the great majority of pregnancies are not that damaging. I mean, they're not going to leave permanent damage. Women can recover from pregnancy.
They all leave permanent scarring. That's just a fact. They can't not, by definition. But to use your example, 90% of like gunshot wounds or something are non-fatal. If you get medical treatment, they don't kill you. So does that mean that the vast majority of gunshot wounds aren't lethal, therefore it's not justified to use lethal force to protect yourself against a gun?
I don't think a baby in your womb is comparable to a person with a gun sending over you. I don't think the results are the same. I don't think the danger is the same. I don't think the perspective is the same. One person is a person consciously seeking to harm you. The other is a baby in your womb that you kind of invited there. So again, there's some damage there, but I'm not sure that the situation seems to come down. Maybe legally it makes
just to clarify, I was comparing to what you said earlier. The vast majority of cases don't cause death, therefore it's not justified to use lethal force. And so the vast majority of cases of gunshot wounds don't cause death. Does that mean that it's not justified to use lethal force? Because it seems to me what makes it justified is that some small minority can cause death or great bodily harm or permanent damage, and that small percentage justifies use of lethal force. It doesn't need to be the majority of cases.
But I think we can determine in most cases if a pregnancy is going to cause lethal harm to a woman, if there's a danger of her losing her life by carrying this pregnancy. I think there's some ways to determining. In most cases, this pregnancy seems normal. It's not going to cause loss of life to the woman. It's going to cause some discomfort for a few months, and the pregnancy, the delivery may be easier or difficult. But saying this justifies destroying a life is, I think, a pretty big step.
Okay, so let's say that a guy had a gun and we could look into the future and know he's only going to shoot you in the leg. And so it's going to be some discomfort for a few months. It's going to be very uncomfortable. Do you now no longer have the right to shoot him in self-defense?
Well, again, I think there's a difference between someone who's seeking to harm you and a baby who's not seeking to harm you. The baby is where you put it, where you and another man created it. It's not doing anything overtly against you. It's not doing anything consciously seeking to harm you. I think there's a difference in intention and the relationship there. The robber is someone outside of you seeking to harm you. The baby is not doing that. There's no intention to harm on the part of a baby.
Well, as far as I know, intent isn't in any of the definitions of self-defense. Like, it's just an irrelevant fact. So if someone, you could say he's having an epileptic seizure and he accidentally shoots you in the leg, it's still self-defense. You can still shoot him in self-defense. So intention is just irrelevant. It's not in any of the criterion of great bodily harm or use of lethal force for self-defense.
Well, again, I think it may be in those definitions, but does it make a difference? I mean, do you feel the same toward a person who's trying to shoot you as a person with epileptic seizure? I would seek in that case, I would not want to kill that person. I want to give him some help and try to disarm him so he doesn't hurt me, but I don't want to kill him.
Right. So, like, if someone is, let's say, having an epileptic seizure while driving a car, and the car comes barreling towards you, and it's going to hit you or your family, do you have a right to like shoot the guy to stop him? I'd say, yeah.
I think I would probably try to get my car out of the way, but
Well, right, but
that's a little bit
that's
different.
irrelevant to the analogy. So the analogy is, do you have the right to shoot him to stop him because that's what you need to do to protect yourself? Well, yes, yes, you
If
do.
that's the only way, if there's no other alternative than shooting the guy, but isn't there a lesser way to lessen the danger without killing the other person? That would seem to be
Not
a
not
last
in the case
resort.
of pregnancy. I mean, you can't like decrease all the physical pain. You either have to have the baby or not have the baby. There's not like a middle ground, I don't think.
Yeah, but again, in most cases, the pregnancy, again, we can tell whether this pregnancy is going to be dangerous or not. We can tell whether the intention of this person with inside you is to hurt you or
Well,
not.
remember. So this we're
But the
comparing this
intention
to
is
like
irrelevant. So yeah.
right. But so like in the case of trying to compare it between pregnancy versus a guy in epilepsy with a car, just having the pregnancy is getting hit by the car. Those two are synonymous here because we know that the damage caused to the body is enough physical pain, permanent scarring, emotional discomfort, distress for months at a time. So we're saying these are equivalent here. We're not saying you're not going to die from the car being hit. You're just going to break your legs essentially, or something along those lines. And if it causes that much harm to you or one of your loved ones, are you justified in shooting the driver, even though he doesn't have intent? I'd say, yeah, clearly. I mean, you have a right to defend yourself.
Well, I think I'm going to disagree with you probably on the legal definition, but again, I just don't see a pregnancy as causing what you described as grieved bodily harm, maybe medical definitions, those types of things. But again, I just don't see that in experience. Most women have multiple pregnancies and don't seem to be having grave consequences for the rest of their life that scar them, that mar them, that destroy them, and those types of things. I don't see that in most cases.
I'm not sure what you mean there, because like literally when the baby comes out, it tears the vagina in like half. That's and it leaves permanent scars. So it definitely leaves permanent. I don't know how you could say it doesn't leave permanent scarring. Um, and it reorganizes the organs in the body. They are moved and they don't go back into the same position. So that's if a robber or something was going to reorganize your organs, I think that would qualify as great bodily harm. I'm not sure why that wouldn't. It seems like
Well,
the fact that
again,
it's now. It seems like well,
because
it
my
seems
wife had two babies, she has a cesarean section. She got a scar there, permanent scar there, but she functioned essentially the same before and after those pregnancies. They didn't
well,
impair her functioning. They didn't destroy her ability to engage in other activities, things like that. They didn't limit her in any way.
I don't know why that matters. Most people who are shot aren't affected by being shot. So, but the fact that they can function psychologically equivalent after getting a scar or something doesn't make it not a scar. It doesn't make it not bad. So the criterion isn't that it causes significant emotional damage that you can't function afterwards. I mean, those do exist. Pregnancy does cause that in women. There are some that do, but I mean, probably about the same as getting emotionally damaged from being shot or something. But that's not really a criterion. I mean, I guess because you can't really measure that. It's not like something you can do in a legal case to say, is this going to cause mental anguish for the rest of your life? Like most things don't do that. That's just it's very rare that that happens. So that's not one of the criterion for great bodily harm. It's does it cause permanent or protected uh, damage to a part of your body? And the answer is well, yeah. Um, does it cause severe and acute pain? Well, yeah. And I gotta find what the third one is. I'm looking it up, trying to find it while we're talking, but I don't
Well,
remember what it is.
the question is it sufficient damage to justify ending a life? Ending a life that you and another person helped create, that's not attacking you volitionally, at least they're in your body by your permission, by your action, you put them in there. Is the harm they're going to cause you sufficient to want you to end this life? I think that's an important question. I'd like to have more discussion on that.
Yeah, for sure. Like, so I'm just looking at some of the examples of great bodily injury: dog bites, swollen black eye, serious abrasions or burns, serious wounds requiring stitches, concussions, gunshot wounds, broken bones. Like, it seems like, yeah, it's in that. It's definitely in that list. I don't see why it wouldn't be.
Yeah, again, on those situations, again, uh, justifying killing a dog that bites you is a little bit different for me than justifying killing a baby who's in you. There's just I think a difference of species there. That maybe I'm guilty of speciesism here, but I do think that human life has a higher value than a dog's life. But maybe
Well,
another issue for another day, though. So.
well, yeah, that's more of a comparison of the amount of damage done. It's not the source of the damage is irrelevant to the argument there. It's just it's trying to assess what counts as damage to the body, which equivalents to great bodily harm. It's irrelevant to the killing of the thing. So that's just a list of things that qualify as great bodily harm.
And that's surprising to me that those things would qualify in such a way that they justify taking a human life.
So like, would you say that you're not allowed to kill someone in self-defense if they like sticked a dog on you or something? Like if you're
I would probably in that case, I may want to try to kill the dog rather than the person, because again, I would say, well, let's say if there's something else that we can do to the person other than kill them, somewhere to stop their action other than killing them.
Okay, what if they tried to bite you? Like if the person was trying to bite your arm off, like are you justified in using lethal force to stop them if you have to?
Well, again, lethal force, I'm not sure. I mean, I would try. I don't think I would. That would be my first instinct to shoot them. I say, stop biting me, you crazy person. Fend them off that way. I would not want to kill them unless some last resort.
Okay, well, we can try that. So, baby, stop growing inside of me. Well, okay, they didn't stop. So now what?
Well, again, they can't. They're not capable of doing that. And again, they're in you by your invitation, your action. And they didn't jump in you involuntarily. They didn't jump upon you, except if there was a case of rape or something. Well, then that could be an invader there. But otherwise, they're inside you by your invitation, your permission, your action. So, penalizing them for what you did seemed a little bit backwards.
Well, there's two things there. One is that's the separate topic, but I think that you don't consent to having biology put a baby in you. So like even if you didn't want to get pregnant, then you didn't consent to the baby being there. Biology put it there against your will, and so you didn't invite the baby in. Biology did against your will, so it wouldn't count as consent if you didn't actually want to get pregnant. It would only count as consent if you deliberately wanted to get pregnant, tried to get pregnant, and then got pregnant. But that's a different question than whether or not you can stop someone in a different way by telling them to stop. So if you're like telling someone to stop biting you and that doesn't work, are you justified in using lethal force? I'd say yes. And so the analogies here are essentially, if you apply them to the context of pregnancy, simply trying another method. There isn't another method. The two options are either get an abortion or go through pregnancy. And those are really the only two options as far as I know. There's no like teleport into a artificial fetus yet. We can't do that yet. That'd be cool, yeah. But we don't have that technology. And so the alternative methods solution just doesn't work in the context of the analogy, because it's not, we don't have an alternative solution for pregnancy. And if we did, I would agree with you. If we had an alternative solution that we could avoid the pain of pregnancy and without killing the baby, then yes, I would agree that it's a more moral option that we should choose for sure.
Well, there's a third option, is to not have sexual intercourse.
You can't go back in time, so go back in time isn't the third option.
Okay, so but again, so in terms of thinking forward here, again, if you don't want to go through a pregnancy, don't put yourself in a position where you can get pregnant. Now, you mentioned not consenting to the laws of biology and things like that. Well, I'm not sure we have a say in that. Those types of things. And again, we can't say that there's we can arrest. Now we can use contraception, those types of things to prevent those consequences, but we can't change the laws of biology there. That's just not up to us.
Well, it's like saying if you didn't go into the street, you wouldn't have gotten hit by the car. So just don't go into the street. Well, that's not really a realistic option. Saying that to not do something which is perfectly rational to do, just a normal human action, is kind of ridiculous in a way. It's like, the thing you don't consent to is the pregnancy, not the sex. The sex is perfectly fine. You can consent to that as much as you want and not consent to the pregnancy. The two are separate actions. So the fact that biology forces pregnancy on you is immoral, in my position. I'm a moral realist, so I think it's immoral. But saying to not do the initial action is irrelevant to the question. It doesn't make a difference. Like you could say, don't go into the street and you wouldn't have gotten hit by the car. Like if in the epilepsy example, so a car is coming down, guys having epilepsy. Well, you shouldn't have gone to the street. Well, that's irrelevant to the question. Like it doesn't doesn't make a difference here. You chose to walk into the street. You still get to shoot the guy in self-defense. Makes no difference if you shouldn't have walked into the street or not.
Yeah, I'm having trouble separating these different issues. I'm still struggling with the idea that you have of the laws of biology being immoral.
So like, do you know what a naturalistic fallacy is?
I'm not sure.
Or
Explain to me.
something is good because it's natural. Like pregnancy is natural, therefore it's good. Like
I
that's
don't go down that line at all.
right.
No.
Well,
Yeah.
so that means that the fact that something is naturally occurring doesn't make it good. Or it's the fact that it's naturally occurring means it could be bad and we should stop it. And so my position is it's if it happens without the consent of the mom wanting to get pregnant, then it's something nature did that's bad, and that we should not hold her accountable for what nature did against her will because it's bad. It's a bad thing that people can get pregnant if they don't want to get pregnant.
That's a very interesting idea. I'm not sure that I can. I need to think that through again. That being immoral, there's such things like kind of like the if I step out of my second floor window and I don't want to fall down to the ground, is gravity being immoral by pulling me down to the ground?
Yes. So
Wow.
if we could like medically stop gravity from pulling you to the ground through, I don't know, gravity abortion, call it a gravity abortion, we would be morally obligated to do so. Yeah, absolutely.
Wow, that's interesting. I think that there's some things we just have to live with, and I think the laws of biology and the laws of gravity are some of the things we just kind of live with. We don't get to choose them to say that they shouldn't apply to me because I don't want them to apply to me. Well, they do, and so you have to kind of live with your understanding of that. That yeah, if I have this sexual activity, it could lead to pregnancy, huh? I may need to rethink that.
Well, yeah, so that's the question, is that if we can use science to counteract that or to overrule that law, are we morally obligated to do so? And I think of yes. So if whether it's the law of biology or the law of gravity, the question is, once those have been applied, are we morally obligated to counteract those things? And because those things are forced onto us without our consent, I think they're immoral. And so, in this context, we should take an action against the immoral actor, which would in this case be biology or gravity. And so, um, in the case of pregnancy, we clearly can medically prevent the law of affecting anybody. We can't abort the baby. So we can overrule the law of biology in this context. And so, if in the case of gravity, we could do the same and overrule the law of gravity to stop you from hitting the ground, it seems like we're obligated to do so.
Well, yeah. But in terms of the biological law here with babies, we're affecting not the biology, we're affecting another living being, the baby. And so there's another person to consider here. And I don't think we've given much consideration to the fact, and this is one of my disappointments with the discussion going on in our country, is we really think this is another person involved here, and they should have some rights and things like that. And so again, if we can, uh, uh, I think it requires a pretty high standard to destroy a life.
Well, I think like in all of my examples, I just grant it's a fully grown human. So like, I consider it is clearly human, that's for sure. And even in the context of it being fully conscious, a fully grown adult of some kind, all of my arguments would still apply because I'm just essentially just granting it's human and saying it's equivalent to use of lethal force to self-defense. So I would go because I do understand there are many arguments that it's not human or whatever, and therefore it's doesn't have any rights. And I think before it's conscious, that's true. Before it has any consciousness, then it's just a blob of cells.
Yeah.
Um, but even if we just grant it's conscious from conception, the self-defense arguments would still be the same.
Yeah. Well, then I'm glad that we agree on the, at least on the beginning point, that the cells in the woman's womb are alive, um, and thus have certain protections there. And so the question, when is it appropriate to end a life? And you say when a life causes grievous bodily harm to another person, the other person is justified in ending that life. And I guess I would say two things that seem to me to make a difference is one that, and can we, is it really grievous bodily harm for a woman to go through a pregnancy? Again, I'm not a woman, haven't been through that situation, so I should defer to them. But my observation is that it doesn't seem to be grievous bodily harm. Maybe that's the legal definition. If so, I might want to quarrel with a legal definition. That's another person for another situation. But at least I'm not sure that is satisfactory to me. Defining pregnancy as grievous bodily harm. And then the second thing is it sufficiently grievous to justify ending another life? That seems to me to be fairly innocent in this situation. It hasn't done anything overtly trying to hurt another person.
Well, yeah, that would lead to questions like, why do you think the legal definition is insufficient in that context? Because it's like, if we take any other example outside of pregnancy where there's a non-intentional cause of damage to the body, like accidental stabbing or accidental shocking or accidental like running someone over, um, in all the other legal cases where self-defense has been judged warranted, it seems like there's even less risk to harm than pregnancy, but they're all justified in those cases. So you're saying in those cases they shouldn't have been justified, and the person should be convicted because the risk of their damage was less than pregnancy.
If the risk to your health and well-being is uh, minimal, and you respond to that threat in by death, I think there's going to be at least be a very careful consideration here. This is not something that should be easily jumped to. That there's a inconvenience, there's discomfort, there's some pain there, but I'm not going to be. My life is not going to be totally disrupted by this pregnancy. It's not going to be permanently damaged by this. Again, there may be a tearing of the vagina or a scar from a C-section, but I'm not sure that's grievous bodily harm. Again, I'm probably quarreling with the legal definition there more than with you. So,
All right, then that's my question. So if we grant the legal definition and apply that to other cases where there's equivalent scarring or damage done to the body, outside it's different, not pregnancy. So other cases where this is happening through like mechanical failures or negligence of cars or whatever. In those cases where it was ruled self-defense was justified because of the damage, which was less than that of pregnancy. Are you saying in those cases that's a wrong decision and the person should have been convicted of a crime in this case for killing that person in self-defense?
if there was an option of avoiding the danger, whatever that was short of killing another person, yeah, I would say that they should be seen. If they had another way very easily to avoid the danger that didn't involve killing another person, I think they should have seen it. Could we take that route? Now, again, as you said, with pregnancy, there's no halfway measures. It's either. So I'm not sure it's a good comparison. But again, taking a life is such a serious thing. I want the threat to someone to be pretty serious before I want to go to say, yeah, it's okay for you to take someone else's life now.
Right, right. So in these cases, there wasn't like an easy option of press button to use ejector seat and just fly off.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine if there was an option, that probably would have been the thing to do. But in these cases, there was either you're going to experience the physical pain and suffering and damage to the body, or you have to kill them in self-defense. Those are like the only two options in these cases, which is why it was self-defense and they didn't get charged with anything because they didn't have another option. And so
Yeah.
in these cases where the damage was equivalent or less than pregnancy and it was justified to use lethal force of self-defense, you're saying that's wrong and that should not have happened in these cases and they should have been prosecuted.
If they could have avoided the danger, for example, if someone's coming with you with a knife and you can knock it out of their hands rather than shoot them, again, I think that I want to be careful that you're using proportionate force. If someone's not threatening your life, if I want to be careful. Maybe it'll be a case by case situation, and maybe the court's made some valid decisions there. But taking a life is a serious thing, and I wouldn't want to be glib about taking another person's life.
I don't think knocking a knife out of other person's hand is really like a viable option. I don't think that's a thing that's a good example, but so
How about
like
if a 4-year-old's attacking you with a knife?
I think there are actual police cases where that's happened and they shoot them.
Really?
Yes. I don't know if it's
That's
4. I
sad.
don't know if a 4-year-old can even walk at 4.
Yeah, well, you can walk it for you. Yeah, yeah. you can walk it at 18 months. So yeah.
But there are cases where children who are like under 10 who attack people with knives, and you can use lethal force to stop them because that's risk of great bodily harm for sure.
Oh, I'm sad to hear that. So I think there's other ways you could have taken and dealt with that other than killing them. So
I don't know about that. It's pretty hard to defend against a knife if you don't have like a shield of some kind.
yeah, but a kid, maybe a very vigorous, strong 9 or 10 year old, but a 3 or 4 year old. Uh, Surely there's ways of defending yourself without having to kill the child.
I can't even picture a 3 or 4 year old with a knife. That's hard for
Yeah,
me. But we know there are cases of children who have weapons and attack people like police, and they are shot in self defense because the risk to the body. Like I think police can shoot you in self defense if they like try to punch them um, hard enough. So it seems like it's there's a strange criterion here that applies to pregnancy, but doesn't seem to apply or work if we hold that same standard to everybody else in the world. That seems unfair to
yeah,
me. It seems like if we used this same standard, a lot of cases where it's like clearly that self-defense would just go out the window and be a unfair standard to be applied in society. And when we use that larger societal metric of what self-defense is, pregnancy clearly applies. It fits in that standard. So it seems very consistent for me.
yeah. Well, again, I would say that there's probably something emotionally in me and many others that a baby in the womb seems so defenseless, so harmless, so things like that, they're not intending to do you any harm. Those types of things, that probably makes a difference. But again, legally, you say intent doesn't make a difference. I think it probably does in terms of how a lot of people feel about it, and maybe that shouldn't be the judge of how we do these things. How we feel about things shouldn't be the determining factor. But I think that the fact that they're there by your invitation, you did something overtly that put them there. They didn't ask to come in there. They're in there by your invitation, by your action, and those types of things. So I think that probably changes how we feel about it. But probably in the bottom line, my difference with you probably has my view of the sanctity of life, that it requires something really, really serious to justify taking a human life. And maybe I want to go beyond the definitions of our legal system that say that define grievous bodily harm in some ways. And I'm not sure I would go that far.
All right. I do have some questions from the audience. Moonshoes asks, what is your position on abortion in the case of rape?
Yeah, I think in the case of rape, it makes a difference to me in that you have not invited that baby to be in you. It's definitely against your will. And so again, regardless of the laws of biology that shouldn't apply to you if you don't want them to, this is someone else's action that put that baby within you. And so I think in that case, I wish I would want a woman to think about this. That baby didn't do this as another person, but I would say I think there's a lot more permissibility there than in the case of you acting voluntarily. So I think rape makes a difference. Yeah.
All right, 60-second skeptics asked, did John state whether he considers consent to sex is equivalent to a consent to pregnancy?
I think consent to sex is at least you're saying I am open to the possibility, because I recognize that sexual intercourse can lead to pregnancy, and so I think you have to at least consent to the possibility of pregnancy when you consent to sex. Now, again, you can use contraception, things like that, but even there, you have to consent that no contraception that we know of is 100% effective. So I think you're consenting to the possibility of pregnancy when you consent to sex.
All right.
Unless we can, again, disallow the laws of biology.
Yeah, that's right. Mr. Universe asking a political question. It says, what is the correlation between abortion and redistribution of wealth? So like in many countries where pregnancy is allowed or versus countries in pregnancy which is disallowed, it causes a disproportionate amount of poverty to certain communities. And so allowing pregnancy would balance out the financial well-being of those communities, I think is the gist of the question.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Again, I think that, I'm not sure I understand the question. Are you saying that you're enforcing abortion on certain people and not allowing for others, so
Oh
that
no,
the
it's
rich
saying
people
that
can have kids and poor people can't?
that's saying that poor people are more disproportionately negatively affected by forcing pregnancies. And so if we ban abortion or whatever, it causes a significant amount of increase in poverty, increase of crime in impoverished communities. And therefore we should allow abortion because it takes off that added stress on those communities.
Yeah, I think I understand the question. If it's in viewed in those lines, and so an argument for abortion could be here are couples having more kids than they possibly can support and things like that. And so if we don't have abortion, and they're going to need a lot more support and things like that, and that could cause some redistribution of wealth. Well, again, I think I want to do everything possible to support those who choose to have their babies. And so whether they put that baby up for adoption, which is again an option not often considered here, that would not cause them a problem with being impoverished. They could give up their babies for adoption. But even beyond that, helping mothers in crisis pregnancies get the prenatal care they need and get the pregnancy and having the childbirth. I would like to do an awful lot more to support women having babies than having abortions. So I'm not
Well, I
sure
think
that
like
we
the in this question, just having going to the hospital and having a birth costs, I think, an average of $12,000, and so even just that is beyond what most people can afford.
yeah. Well, again, I would want to have both the state and private organizations that support that help women out with that, so that they don't incur that financial burden.
That's fair. Question from Colin. Give. Oh, I guess you just answered that. You would support giving more taxes to organizations that help with
Yeah,
providing those.
I have in fact supported some of those organizations. Yeah.
Cool. Nick asks, "What would you do if you got pregnant?"
I would call the newspapers. There's a miracle here.
Charles Woods asks, "How does he justify giving a fetus extra rights to use another person's body against their will, which we don't give anybody else?"
Again, I'm not saying that a baby uses another person's body against their will. They're in there. The baby's in there by that person's overt act. The baby didn't jump in there involuntarily. The person did something. So I think that gives them a right. You invited them in. I do think that gives that fetus some rights. You help create this life, and now this life is there. You created that life, so that you've done something there, that you've created this person that now has rights.
Well, so it's like if you invite someone into your home, do they get to stay there indefinitely, or do you get to kick them out at some point?
Well, again, yeah, you do after 9 months.
So, like a 9-month statute, if you invite someone to your home,
Yeah,
they
yeah,
get to stay for 9 months.
9 month statute. At least in this case, it is.
All right. So I'm late. I understand your personal preference, but what are your prescriptions at the level of law with abortion?
Yeah, this is a really tough question because, again, you've mentioned many legal qualifications and things like that. Again, my number one goal, I wish a law was not necessary against abortion. My personal preference would be that people would value life and love life and support life, and there wouldn't be no need for a law against abortion. So that would be my desire. Now, that may be unrealistic, and so right now, I do
That
think.
would kind of like defeat the point. We wouldn't need any laws at that point. People are just perfect. We shouldn't have laws. People
Yeah,
should be
exactly. So
perfect.
there'd be no difference that we would. So that would be my goal, is that if I could act in such a way that I would want to advocate that life is wonderful and life is good and babies are good and those types of things. And so I wish there were no need for a law. But again, if I do think that I'm trying to, if this is an innocent life in a woman's womb, I want to be very careful, but I want to say, yeah, I think that life should be protected by law.
Gotcha. Sebi asked, let's say we get into a car and go for a drive and hit someone. Should the law force the driver to hand over a kidney to save their life?
Why would hitting someone require them to need a kidney? Again, I think that if I know someone needs a kidney to live, and I have a kidney that is compatible, I think that's a very virtuous thing to give a kidney. I'm not sure that I would make it a law to force you to do that, because I didn't. Again, I didn't. If I hit them, there may be a penalty I need to pay for doing them. Maybe go to jail or something. Again, if they gave me, you can go to jail or give a kidney, I'd probably give a kidney.
Well, I think it's like asking, in the context of pregnancy, where you do something that puts an innocent person in danger. In this context, the baby is essentially using your internal organs for their use. And so, if you hit somebody, would you be obligated to give them use of your internal organs to save their life, like in the case of a car crash?
Yeah. If that was going to cause them to die, I'm not sure if I want a law to do it, but I said I think I might feel obligated to do something, because if I'm going to cause their death by what I did, I'd want to prevent their death.
Well, that seems like a very good analogy to abortion in this case, where um, you have the option of allowing the baby to use your internal organs, which is moral, I agree, but you aren't obligated to do so. And it's perfectly justified to say, no, I'm not going to let another person use my internal organs, even if it's your fault that they were hit by the car.
Yeah. If I did something that was going to cause their death, unless I did something with my internal organs, I can see a pretty good case that, that if we value life, and I'm the one that's going to cause their death if I don't do this, I think I could see a case being made for doing that.
For forcing people to use your organs if you endanger them?
Forcing them to use my organ, if I could give them at least the option, say, if I'm going to cause your death unless you use my organs, and I'm the one that did this, I initiated the sequence of events here that's going to cause you to lose your life unless I let you use my organs. I think there may be a case for saying that, yeah, you should let them use your organs there, because you did something. It's your action. There should be some type of responsibility you take for your actions there.
Gotcha. Next one was, how is executing a murderer justice and having an abortion that will impoverish your family wrong?
Wow. Well, I think there's.
Well, it's asking about execution, death penalty
Yeah,
for murder or whatever, because you're ending a human life.
yeah,
And so, in that context, they're not a danger to anybody anymore because they're in prison. Essentially, they can't do anything.
yeah.
So, is it equally as wrong to put a murderer to death because that's you should value life or something along those lines?
Yeah, there's a couple of issues here. First, in terms of the basic moral question, when someone has killed someone, I could say if they deliberately, with malice aforethought, kill someone, you could argue they have forfeited their right to life. They no longer have the right to life. They forfeited that by doing that. At the same time, I recognize with a justice system that is disproportionate, that's not always very fair, there could be some need for some safeguards there. But I think in terms of basic morality, if you think that justice demands, not as deterrent, but as justice in terms of retribution, that when someone kills someone, they forfeit their right to life, that's different than abortion.
Okay. Sebi asks, it's about risk. Every time you have sex, there's a risk of getting pregnancy, and every time you go for a drive, there's a risk of getting into a car crash.
Yeah.
So I think he's making a comparison that the woman isn't to blame for the pregnancy, just like getting into a car isn't to blame for getting into a car crash. And so
Well,
you're not
no.
like responsible for the car crash, and just like you're not responsible for the pregnancy.
Well, again, there can be a situation where someone crashes into you in a car crash. In a pregnancy, you're the one taking the overt act that leads to the pregnancy.
Well, I think he's saying that biology making you pregnant is the car crash. That is somebody else crashing into you. Biology is crashing into you when you get pregnant in that case.
I don't see biology as an active actor against you. Those types of things. Again, why I have a difficulty with saying that biology is immoral. I don't see that. It is what it is. It simply is.
Well, so it'd be more like a rock falling. So say you go for a drive and a landslide or a bridge breaks and gets into a car crash that way. I think he's saying that biology would be equivalent to the bridge falling. It's clearly not anybody's fault, but it's an act of nature that you are a victim of, and you're not responsible just because you chose to go driving.
I see a difference there. I think there's a big difference there.
What is it?
Well, again, when you have sex, you're doing something that can, without someone's interference, can lead to a pregnancy. You can go driving. If no one else is driving on the highway, you'll never have a wreck.
Well, like, so a bridge collapsing or a rock landslide, you could still get into a wreck with no one else on the road.
Yeah. Again, I don't think that's the same as doing something that in the normal course of the event leads to pregnancy. This is not unforeseen. This is not something unforeseen. It's not something unusual. It's not something that requires a failure. This is when biology works as it normally does.
All right. Oh, I already asked that one. Does John agree that all fathers should be forced to be financially responsible for their children, even if they are not married to the mother, Mary's?
I do. If you're a man and you help create a life, I think you have a moral responsibility to help provide for and protect that life. And I'm very, very disappointed that we've made abortion totally an issue on the mother. I think that if you're a man and you help create a life, I think there's some type of responsibility there. And exactly how we could enforce that or make that happen, I'm not sure how feasible it would be, things like that. But I do think that if you're a man and you help create a life, you should take some responsibility there. You should step up.
Gotcha. I don't. Blaster Master asks, I don't see how knowing there is a risk to something is consent to the risk happening. How does that work? I am consenting to a car crash every time I drive. I would say no. So he's asking, like, response to your previous question. What's the difference between doing something that has a natural risk of damage and the pregnancy case?
I guess I would compare the comparison is having sex to driving down a road that has no other cars on it. There's no other person involved in here. So you're driving down a road that has no other cars. Again, I don't think there's a risk to having a crash there, but having sex, there is definitely a risk there that you're consenting to.
So is that like a probability argument that if you choose to do something that has a high risk of this occurring, then that is what is the determining factor? So like if we said driving down, I don't know, a really bad road on the mountains of China that are really not really well kept or something.
Yeah. Well, maybe in some case you are consenting to the risk of having a car crash every time you drive. Yeah, you choose to take that risk. And then if you go out there and cause a wreck, well, then you take some responsibility there for your actions.
Gotcha. If life should always be protected by law, should we criminalize people who botch suicide attempts or criminalize suicide attempts?
I'm not sure we should criminalize them. I'd say we should try to help them because, again, they try to take their life. That's something. There must be something pretty seriously bad there, either a horrible situation or a horrible life or whatever. But again, I would not to criminalize, but I think I would want to help them so that their life can be spared.
I think suicide is actually illegal. I don't remember. I think there is actually a law against it.
Yeah. Now, when you're successful, you don't get prosecuted. But again, if you botch it, I'm not sure if ever heard somebody prosecuted for botching a suicide attempt either. So,
yeah.
Interesting question there.
TJump, does he think the kids killed in the flood went to heaven? And if so, are there any differences between that and the kids aborted going to heaven?
Yeah, I mean, this is a difficult question. I'm not sure that we have, at least as a theologian, as a Bible scholar, definite information. That the most common idea out there is the idea there's an age of accountability, that when you recognize your moral actions and that if you die before that age, you're welcome into God's presence. Those stuff. So those ideas are there. So again, I'm not sure if you're talking about kids killed in the flood that were 2 or 3 years old, and those in abortion going to heaven. I'm not sure there is a difference. So I'd say I think probably, yeah, those very young kids killed in a flood could be comparable to kids killed in abortion.
Gotcha.
Again, for that reason, you should say, well, then you should abort all kids before they're born, so they'll all go to heaven.
Yeah.
Again, that's doing evil for good ends. I don't think it's a good practice there.
That, oh, so many questions. Like, well, that the entire global flood was just that, wasn't it? Doing evil to do getting good ends, like to wipe out the planet of all the bad people to make not less bad people or something. What separate topic, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
But we've been going for about an hour. Got about 5 minutes left. Do you want to give any links or references where people can find more about your work?
Oh gosh, you can go to I teach at Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary. You can go to our website sebts.edu and get my email and different books I've written, those types of things. So yeah, go to the seminary or just contact me, J Hammett, sebts.edu. Be glad to give any references, those types of things.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it. It was a great conversation, and hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you very much, Tom.